Do you remember The Black Hole? It's one of the most beloved films of all time. When Durant peels back the humanoid robot's mask and the face of a man who is nearly dead appears in close-up, the entire theatre gasps. I still remember the sharp intakes of breath, the panicked whispers, and then a few seconds later the scream that erupts when Reinhardt's horrifying face appears behind Maximilian's red glass. That was the reaction of people who never expected Disney to dare do something like this. But the real black hole opened up outside the camera, dragging the entire production into one accident after another. A legendary writer was fired before his first lunch. A female lead nearly lost her life in a tragic accident. And an expensive spaceship model was taken out in a brutally violent way somewhere no one would have expected. Below are 15 shocking facts hidden behind the black hole. Watch until the end because the final one will leave you stunned. 15. Disney's first PG-rated film the moment the fairy tale cracked. In our memories, Disney used to be an absolutely safe place. Turn on the TV and there was a castle music swelling everything neatly arranged so no one had to worry. Children laughed. Adults felt reassured. Even when evil appeared, it was always wrapped in gentle colours. Then in 1979, the black hole arrived and quietly shattered all of that. Families entered the theatre with a familiar assumption. It's Disney, what could be scary? And then they sat in silence as they watched humans crushed by machines, robots tearing each other apart with spinning blades, middle-aged scientists arguing about ethics about the right to control life itself. Conversations not meant for children. Worse still was the language. Hell. Damn. Words that Disney had once strictly forbidden now echoed through the theatre. For kids who grew up with Mary Poppins or bedknobs and broomsticks, it wasn't just a shock, it felt like a betrayal of memory. Parents, meanwhile, were caught off guard, cover their children's eyes, or admit that Disney had changed. The black hole never became a box office phenomenon like Star Wars, but it opened a crack small quiet in the fairy tale wall. Through that crack, darkness began to seep in. Without the black hole, there would be no Tron, no Return to Oz, no wave of dark live-action fantasy experiments in the 1980s. And it proved something no one had dared to say before even the most family-friendly studio in the world has a dark side. 14. An unmarketable name and history veered in another direction. As a child, I always assumed that iconic science fiction characters were destined from the very beginning. Only later did I realise that sometimes film history shifts because of a single tiny moment. During the casting of The Black Hole, director Gary Nelson wanted a fresh face. He found a young actress from the New York stage, intelligent, sharp, with eyes strong enough to stand before the abyss of space. Her name was Sigourney Weaver. Nelson believed she had exactly what the film needed, the cool seriousness of a real scientist. But when her name reached the executives, the response was swift and cold. That name is too ugly to sell tickets. That was it. A name deemed not Disney-friendly slammed the door shut. Weaver walked away. A few months later, she stepped into another Project Alien. And science fiction history changed forever. The irony here is almost painful. The studio that believed she couldn't be marketed ended up missing the woman who would redefine the image of the female sci-fi hero. Disney chose the safe option, Yvette Mimieux, a familiar face. Properly Disney. Mimieux was no Ripley. Her Dr. Kate McRae was quiet intellect, non-violent, restrained, unbreakable in a different way. Yet she still made history, the first female lead scientist in a Disney live-action film. Two paths, two outcomes. One conservative decision pushed Weaver toward global icon status. Disney preserved tradition and settled for a modest milestone instead of a revolution. 13. Norman Bates boards a spaceship and Disney can't turn back. Before stepping onto a Disney spaceship, Anthony Perkins taught an entire generation how to fear a perfectly ordinary-looking man in Psycho. And the memory of that role, the one that once froze theatres into silence, made the black hole all the more terrifying. The moment he appears aboard the Disney spacecraft, something feels off, like something that doesn't belong. Perkins carries the legacy of Psycho with him. A deep-rooted unease etched into popular culture. As Dr. Alex Durant, he doesn't overplay it. He whispers, he observes, he admires Reinhardt in a slightly off-kilter way. Everything stays beneath the surface, and that's precisely what makes it frightening. Then comes the death. Durant is crushed by the spinning blade of the red robot Maximilian, metal grinding, mechanical motion, and a human body erased in seconds. It is one of the most violent moments Disney ever put on screen. Audiences were unprepared, and in that instant, the black hole crossed the final boundary of family Disney. Perkins's fate didn't just shock, it branded the film. After that scene, no one could reassure themselves that everything will be okay. Norman Bates had boarded a spaceship, and from that moment on, Disney could no longer return to its old place of safety. 12. Robot Bob was born from destruction. Do you remember the Robot Bob? He wasn't powerful, but almost everyone who watched the black hole wanted to protect him. Bob looked like a survivor, battered crooked, as if he had been forgotten for a very long time in some dark corner of the Cygnus. And it was precisely that feeling that gave Bob a soul. Few people know that this look was never planned from the start. When the model shop delivered the first design director, Gary Nelson hated it immediately. The robot was too clean, too symmetrical, too new. It looked like something fresh off an assembly line, not a machine that had wandered for 20 years aboard a dead ship. To the shock of the entire crew, Nelson grabbed a baseball bat, rushed at the clay reference model, and started smashing it again and again until the head was dented. The body leaned sharply to one side, and the surface was covered in cracks. When he finally stopped, that was the Bob he wanted to see. The team rebuilt the robot to match that battered version exactly. On screen, that imperfection made Bob fragile, a second-tier machine, a wounded figure in an indifferent world. And audiences, especially children, immediately took its side. Ironically, one of the most beloved robots in Disney history was born not from meticulous care, but from deliberate destruction. 11. The 4-hour employee and the banned pitch. When Disney decided to make serious science fiction, they quickly ran into an uncomfortable truth. The writers who had penned stories about umbrella-flying nannies or sentient cars weren't enough. To prove to Hollywood that this time it's real, they made a bold move, hiring Harlan Ellison. Ellison was no ordinary writer. He was a legend, the name behind the classic Star Trek episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. Hiring Ellison was a statement Disney was ready to step out of its comfort zone. But Disney forgot one crucial thing. Ellison had no breaks. On his very first day, Ellison walked into the studio cafeteria for lunch. He sat down at a table full of writers and producers and began to stir things up. Ellison pitched an idea for a new animated film improvising an X-rated storyline featuring Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck and Tinker Bell in shockingly explicit adult situations. He even used voices, acting it all out like a one-man stage performance. The table froze. What Ellison didn't know was that at the table right next to them sat Roy O. Disney, Walt Disney's nephew and the head of the company, listening to every word. Before lunch was over, Ellison returned to his office. His nameplate was gone. On the desk lay a termination notice. He had been a Disney employee for less than 4 hours. It wasn't just a firing. It was the moment Disney realized that the darkness they wanted to touch was far harder to control than they had imagined. 10. A haircut and a tragic ending. Amid the chaos of the script, Disney needed something familiar to hold on to. They found it in Jennifer O'Neill. She was beautiful on the rise, and above all, known for her long flowing hair, an essential part of her image. When O'Neill was cast as Dr. Kate McRae, Everything seemed settled. Until director Gary Nelson realised a very practical problem here in a zero-gravity environment. There was no CGI at the time. Hair couldn't be made to float digitally. Wires looked fake. Gel made it stiff. The camera would expose every trick. There was only one solution: cut the hair. For an actress whose image was built around long hair, the request was almost cruel. O'Neill was devastated, but she wanted to keep the role. She invited legendary hairstylist Vidal Sassoon to cut her hair right on set. The haircut became something like a farewell ritual. Stories say O'Neill drank a few glasses of wine to steady herself as lock after lock fell away. When it was over, she suffered a psychological shock and may not have been fully clear-headed. She drove home. An accident occurred on the way. It was severe enough that O'Neill was hospitalised and unable to continue working. Disney, with millions of dollars hanging in the balance, didn't wait. They replaced her with Yvette Mimieux, who agreed to the short curly hairstyle without a word of protest. One role changed hands, one career veered onto a different path, and one behind-the-scenes tragedy that audiences would never see on screen. 9. A film with no ending script. When I watched The Black Hole, I always assumed the ending had been planned from the start. Only later did I learn a truth that sounds like a bad joke. The Black Hole entered principal photography without an ending. The film had everything a major production needed: an enormous budget, massive sets, and a cast of well-known actors. But it was missing the most vital thing of all. The shooting script that the director and actors held in their hands ended with exactly one sentence. They go through the black hole. Period. The writers had backed themselves into a corner. They had built the black hole as an absolute force of the universe, yet had no idea what would happen once the characters entered it. For months of filming, the atmosphere behind the camera wasn't excitement, it was panic. The director and the effects team brainstormed every possible solution they could think of. Ideas came and were torn up as quickly as scrap paper. The hesitation dragged on until the final days of shooting. Actors complained they didn't understand their characters' motivations. Each day on set brought a different version of the script. They were performing as if in a vacuum, moving forward without knowing where they were going. A movie about a black hole was being shot inside its own creative black hole. 8. A hidden joke, or the universe's sentence. Time was running out, money was still burning, and the ending still didn't exist. Finally, the visual effects team made a near-desperate decision. If the science couldn't be explained, then abandon science altogether. They turned to the metaphysical. If the black hole wasn't a physical phenomenon, then what was it? A gateway to another world, a boundary between life and death. And so, a literal hell was constructed. Real fire, jagged rocks, colours and compositions that directly evoked Dante's Inferno. In the final sequence, the villain, Dr. Reinhardt, and his guardian robot Maximilian aren't crushed by gravity, they are transported to that realm like a sentence being carried out. But the real blow lies in a detail many people miss. The actor who played Reinhardt was named Maximilian Schell. In the final moment, the character Reinhardt is trapped inside the metal shell of the robot Maximilian. Human eyes visible behind red glass trembling as they stare into the sea of fire. A chilling wordplay, Maximilian Schell trapped inside a shell named Maximilian. It's a dark joke or a curse left behind by the writers and effects team at the last minute. The entire ending was assembled almost entirely in post-production. It wasn't written from the beginning. It wasn't prepared. It was simply a desperate attempt to create an ending that felt profound for a film that never truly knew how it would end. And it's precisely that ambiguity that makes it so haunting. 7. The devil hidden in the robot's design. From the moment he first appears, the robot Maximilian makes audiences uneasy. Over 6 feet tall, floating in silence, 2 arms ending in spinning blades without emotion. Maximilian doesn't run, doesn't roar, doesn't show off his strength. He simply moves closer. The design team didn't draw inspiration from other sci-fi robots. Instead, they turned to a place very familiar, yet very dark within Disney's own history. Concept artist George McInnes admitted that Maximilian's design was based on Chernabog, the giant winged demon from the Night on Bald Mountain sequence in Fantasia 1940. The heavy upper body, the dominating hovering posture, the glowing red glass like demonic eyes, the stance of looming above, looking down in judgment. Maximilian isn't a bodyguard. He's a devil clad in metal. And like Chernabog, he doesn't need to speak. His mere presence is enough to signal one thing: this place is not safe. And there is no magic that will save you from a fate already decided. In a Disney film, that image was unprecedented. Not evil as a lesson for children, but evil as an entity that simply exists, needing no justification. 6. Two galaxies, one sound. Are you like me? When watching The Black Hole, you might not remember every scene or every frame. But if you're asked about the feeling when the doors on the USS Cygnus open, many people describe the same thing: a cold, spine-chilling hiss, as if the air itself were being torn apart. What's strange is that the sound isn't unfamiliar. Sharp-eared viewers eventually realised it's the very same door sound used on the Death Star in Star Wars. The same rhythm, the same mechanical breath, the same sensation of stepping into a place you were never meant to enter. At first, people suspected everything from copying to quiet rivalry. But the truth is far more mundane. In the film industry, sound designers don't start from scratch every time. They rely on shared sound libraries effects that are stored, shared and reused. And that famous door sound was created by Ben Burt in a disarmingly simple way, pulling a sheet of paper out of an envelope. The sound was too good, too perfect, so it ended up in a library that the Disney sound team also had access to. And just like that, two of the late 70s most competitive space epics became linked by a single noise. The USS Cygnus and the Death Star, sonically speaking, were as if they shopped for parts at the same hardware store. And every time the Cygnus doors open carrying that familiar sound, it's as if you hear a whisper, two different galaxies sharing the same fear. 5. The undignified death of the brass ship. Do you feel the same way I do, that the USS Cygnus looks unlike any other spaceship? It's an open framework, glowing from within like a crystal cathedral drifting through the void. Beautiful, cold and unsafe, perfectly in tune with the spirit of the black hole. To create that image, Disney's model shop did something insane. They built a model 12 feet long, weighing 175 pounds, made almost entirely of brass, so it could withstand a complex internal lighting system with thousands of tiny bulbs. In 1979, the model cost over $100,000, a staggering sum. It wasn't just a prop, it was a work of art. You'd think something like that would end up in a museum, but the fate of the Cygnus was heartbreakingly mundane. After filming wrapped, the model was crated up and moved into a storage area behind the Disney lot, a place grimly known as the Boneyard. It sat there year after year, without light, without music. Then, one day, a forklift driver accidentally backed up the wrong way. One bad angle. The crate containing the Cygnus was struck head-on. The delicate brass framework was crushed instantly. Beyond repair, beyond saving. One of the most expensive models in Hollywood history died because of a careless maneuver. In the end, it was thrown away. A ship that once symbolised beauty and fear in cinema met its end as anonymous scrap. 4. The illusion of the glass armada. When watching The Black Hole, many people believe they're seeing vast halls, endless corridors, an entire city floating in space. But the truth is simple. Disney couldn't afford to build all of that. Had they constructed the Cygnus sets exactly as seen on screen, the studio might have gone bankrupt. The solution wasn't metal or concrete, it was paint. The Black Hole relied almost entirely on the talent of Peter Ellenshaw, the legendary Disney artist, who had retired only to be brought back for one final masterpiece. Ellenshaw created more than 150 matte paintings for the film, a record at the time. Matte painting is both simple and magical. A sheet of glass is placed in front of the camera. The artist paints the background onto it, leaving a clear area where the actors are filmed live. Ellenshaw's work was so precise that many actors couldn't tell where the real set ended and the painting began. They walked through a world half real, half illusion without even realizing it. And thanks to newly developed computer-controlled cameras, the camera could move through the paintings, creating a sense of three-dimensional space that static images could never achieve. The result was a perfect illusion, a fleet made of glass, a floating cathedral, a world that didn't exist, yet looked more real than reality itself. In a way, The Black Hole isn't just a film. It's a gallery of Ellenshaw paintings brought to life by motion. 3. The swear words that broke the Disney mold. If you had to name the greatest legacy of The Black Hole, it probably wouldn't be the imagery nor the story. It would be the rating. For decades, the Walt Disney Productions label was almost synonymous with one thing: G-rated. Family films, safe, suitable for children, nothing for adults to worry about. But after Star Wars, Disney began to realize a harsh truth. A G rating was no longer a badge of honor. It had become box office poison. Teens and adults saw G-rated sci-fi and thought, that's a kid's movie. And they didn't buy tickets. To compete, Disney needed something very small but critically important PG. Not because the content was truly extreme, but because PG carried a sense of edge, risk, depth. When The Black Hole was screened for the MPAA, the verdict came back as G. For Disney, that was a disaster. Stories say the producers went back into the editing room not to add more action or gore, but to do one very specific thing: insert mild swear words. Damn. Hell, words that had once been absolutely forbidden in Disney films were now deliberately added. Not because the characters needed them, but because the rating did. The tactic worked. The MPAA upgraded the film to PG. And for the first time, Disney officially crossed a boundary it had imposed on itself. More importantly, this rule-breaking move paved the way for something much bigger. Touchstone Pictures, the label that allowed Disney to make adult films without dirtying its core family brand. 2. A toy empire bets on the wrong horse. In the 1970s, Mego dominated the action figure market. They knew how to turn movies into money. And then, in 1976, they made a mistake that went down in history. Mego was offered the Star Wars license, and they turned it down. They thought the film would flop. Kenner picked it up. The rest is history. Haunted by that blunder, Mego was determined not to miss out again. When The Black Hole appeared, they saw a chance at redemption. A big space film. Disney behind it. Robots, villains, spaceships. They went all in. Mego bought the license and poured millions of dollars into a full toy line. And to be fair, the toys were very well made. Many collectors later argued that the Black Hole figures were sculpted better than contemporary Star Wars figures. But there was one thing Mego hadn't accounted for children. Kids didn't want to play with a philosophical mad scientist. They didn't want to hold a robot descending into hell. There were no lightsabers, no clear good versus evil battles. The toys sat untouched on shelves year after year. Losses from The Black Hole combined with Star Wars continuing to dominate the market broke Mego. In 1982, the company went bankrupt. The failure of the Black Hole merchandise became the final nail in the coffin of one of the biggest toy companies of the 1970s. 1. Despite the chaos, The Black Hole still impressed the Academy. The strangest thing about The Black Hole is this: despite the chaos, despite the lack of direction, despite no one being quite sure what kind of film it was, the Academy still had to acknowledge it. In 1980, the film received 2 Oscar nominations: Best Cinematography and Best Visual Effects. For Disney, that was no small feat. This was a studio known for animation and fairy tales, not for serious live-action science fiction. massive matte paintings, intricate models, and the in-house ACES effects system stood shoulder to shoulder with films that had been produced far more smoothly and with much clearer direction. Much of the credit belonged to cinematographer Frank Phillips. His dark, moody lighting turned the USS Cygnus into a haunted cathedral, where space was no longer a place of discovery, but a place of judgment. These nominations proved something important Disney could play on the sci-fi field. For a studio long dismissed as the fairy tale company, being mentioned at the Oscars in serious technical categories felt like entering a new orbit. And when everything is over, the black hole still hangs there like the Cygnus itself. It's the Disney film that dared to step into darkness before Disney was ready to admit it even had a dark side. A movie born from uncertainty, sustained by risk and ending, with images that even adults aren't sure they fully understand. Perhaps that's why the black hole never truly disappears. If the Cygnus robot, Bob Maximilian, or that haunting ending still linger somewhere in your memory, leave a comment which detail stayed with you the most. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss the next videos.